Welcome everybody, it's another lovely talk for the John Arban Mill Open Weekend. This is Kerry from Ginger Pinks, and she's going to take you through a talk which is from petal to palette, is that right?
It is right. Correct,
I'm
yes.
kind of reading it through you to make sure I've said the right thing. Enjoy, I hope you have a fabulous talk, and I hope you all have an amazing time listening to what you have to say about natural dyeing.
Yeah.
I shall leave you to it, and I'm going to exit there.
See you later. First of all, thank you all for coming. I'm assuming some of you know about plant dyeing or have tried it maybe before. Hands up who's tried it. Yeah. Oh, okay. So hopefully in this talk you'll learn a little bit more about certainly my methods, and you'll be able to go home, maybe try something in your kitchen, not be too intimidated by it, because it's not scary and it's really good fun. My business is called Ginger Pink Yarns. Previous to starting this business, I was a graphic designer. I still am a graphic designer, and worked in publishing, worked on magazines. Funnily enough, worked on The Knitter and Simply Knitting, and so I've gone full circle. And now I feature in the magazines as a dyer, but I'm not as a designer. But 20 odd years I was doing that. And that also comes in quite handy, doing my labels and things and my marketing, and so that's quite nice. I was inspired to start dyeing through a workshop I did in London with the Wool Kitchen. I don't know if any of you know the Wool Kitchen, Helen. She dyes lots of neons and speckles, and it's just it's bright and zingy and completely not what I do. I do dye lots of quite vibrant colours, but not that kind of neon, as you imagine those kind of neon colours to look. But I came away from it, I loved it, and I was just really inspired to go home and try something myself in my kitchen. And at the time, I had a little one. And he was crawling around and into everything, so I really couldn't risk bringing in those kind of powdered dyes and mixing those acid dyes in my kitchen. It just wasn't safe with him around. So, and Nick, my husband there, he's kind of a forager. He knows a lot about foraging and knew a lot about plant dyes. So that kind of set me off on my journey. He kind of advised me on what plants give good colour. And we're talking about kind of, dandelions and things that you can easily pick out and about on a walk, basically. I liked the idea of, as I just said, going for a walk and picking dock leaves and dandelions and and extracting colour from those plants that you see everywhere, easy to get hold of. Unfortunately, we were just going into lockdown, so when I did the workshop with the dye kitchen, with the Wool Kitchen, it was February 2020. So it was just starting the COVID. It was in the news, and we were all going, no, it won't happen, and it did, and we all went into lockdown. So my business idea kind of was put literally on the back burner, and I had a long time to experiment. So there was lots of playing around with colour, and I would, in my allotted exercise, would sneak next door to the playing field and pick loads of dandelions, because there was nobody mowing, so it was just swathes of dandelions across, and I could just combine harvester all of them. It was fab. I left some for the insects. But I like the idea of plant dyes having less of an impact on the environment. That's really important to me. Sustainable. I try to use British yarns as well. So John Arban's wool is just so beautiful. And their new range of Devon Naturals is so local as well. So I just love the fact that the wool is down the road and the plants are around me, not far from where I live, and growing in the garden as well. So that's really important to me. So there's no air miles, some air miles with some of the dyes, but I'll talk about that later. So I talked about dandelions being one of the first plants I dyed with. And when I first put those into the pot, that was my first experimenting, really. And when I first put the yarn in the pot with the dandelions and then pulled it out and got this vibrant, bright yellow, I was just hooked, and that was the beginning of my journey really, and the beginning of the idea to start the business. But I had a lot of time at home juggling stuff, but trying out various experiments. So for anybody that is thinking about starting dyeing, or certainly having a go at it, things like onion skins and avocado, so your kitchen waste is perfect for that. So collect all your onion skins. Dandelions are great. The only thing I would say about most dyes is they need a mordant. So by all means have a play in your kitchen. You don't really need to mordant your yarn at that stage. You just have a play and see what colours come out, and you can dye fabric and you can dye wool, you can dye anything. But if you want it to stick, if you want that colour to not wash out and you don't want it to fade, then you have to mordant. So lots of dyes are called, some dyes are fugitive, which is exactly what the word means. It runs, it doesn't last, it will wash out, or it will slowly fade. It doesn't just suddenly fade. The beautiful thing about plant dyes is they kind of age. They don't just suddenly go bleh, which is nice. And a substantive dye is a dye that will basically last. It won't fade. Well, everything fades over time, even synthetic colours, but it won't wash out and it will last. And talking about the substantive dyes, so things like madder root and Weld, and I'll talk about all these plants in a bit and my methods. But these are the plants, when you go and have a look at my, hopefully you'll go and have a look at my stand in a bit, and you'll see the colours that I like to dye with, and we'll talk about those in a bit. So mordanting. So I don't know, has anybody heard of a mordant? Yeah? So mordanting is it's the first stage of dyeing with plant dyes. And you can see aluminium sulfate. That sounds much scarier than it actually is. It's not. It's not toxic. And people think that mordanting, some mordants are toxic, and us plant dyes tend to not use anything that's toxic anymore. There's lots of modifiers like chrome and tin, and plant dyes don't. Once upon a time, people did use these crazily. It's quite terrifying, and put them down the drain, but not anymore. And that was a very long time ago. So I personally use something called aluminium sulfate, and that is actually used in food, in pickling, and so it is very safe to use. As long as you, like any kind of powder, you would cover your face with a mask, just because you don't want to breathe it in and you don't want it to get in your eyes, like any other household chemical, basically. And that basically, the aluminium sulfate improves wash and light fastness. So it makes a chemical bond between the dye and the wool. It basically allows the dye to stick to the wool. So that's the first process. So the wool is simmered. First of all, I scour the wool, so that washes out any oils, lanolin, and that helps the colour stick. So you want nice, clean yarn before you dye. Yes, also, a little tip is cream of tartar. So if you were to try dyeing at home, adding cream of tartar will also help with the colours, but it also keeps the wool soft. So sometimes alum can kind of irritate the wool a little bit and make it slightly harsh. The cream of tartar stops that happening. And that was a bit of a learning curve, because I was mordanting wool earlier on and it was crispy. And I was like, well, nobody's going to want to wear this. This is horrible. What's happening? Mm-hmm. But then adding cream of tartar is brilliant. It really, really helps. And it keeps colours clear, I think. It really helps with the colours when you're dyeing. Also, you can mordant with iron. I don't mordant with iron. I modify with iron, so I change colours sometimes with iron, but I don't modify. You can use oak galls as well, which is actually very good for cottons, not so much for yarns. And also rhubarb leaves, which are toxic. So if you were to use rhubarb leaves, it's a great mordant, but open all your windows and doors because it's actually quite a dangerous thing to mordant with. So, but it's great that you can actually mordant with all these natural plants. It's brilliant. So it's all out there for you to pick. I'd say apart from the alum, which obviously I do buy And you can find that in nature, but I'm not about to go excavating to find that. So I do try to be as I said, as plant-based and natural as possible. So I tend not to use modifiers. I tend to let the colours speak for themselves. So what you see is what you get, basically. So, and I use the various different, I'm going to talk about that later because I'm jumping ahead of myself. We'll talk about the individual plants and then that's easier. So the history of plant dyeing is there were 3 dyes that have been used for thousands of years historically, and they are madder root. Has anybody heard of madder root? Yes. Weld, familiar with Weld, and Woad, and also indigo. But Woad was, these 3 dyes were incredibly popular, and just for a very, very long time they were appreciated for their light fastness. So they knew a long time ago that these dyes would last. Weld for yellow, madders for pinks and reds, and obviously the Woad for blue. And this tapestry here, The Hunt of the Unicorn, it dates back to 1500. There are actually lots and lots of tapestries that demonstrate how powerful these dyes are. So you can see the blues and the yellows and the reds, these kind of brick reds here, and that's those dyes basically. And there are tapestries and garments in museums, and fair enough, you know, they've been very well protected, kept out of the light, but you can still see the yellows and the pinks and the blues. So these are really important dyes historically before synthetic dyes came along. So, madder root. So I'm going to go through the dyes that I use the most and my personal favourite dyes. So madder root has got a chemical in it called alizarin. I possibly haven't said that right, but I've had a go at it. And it is rich in the roots, so you actually dye with the roots, not the plant. And the plant takes 2 to 3 years for it to actually mature for you to be able to harvest the roots to dye with. But they're incredibly rich with colour. You get a vast palette of pinks, reds. Actually, red is elusive. Red, I've not seen anyone actually get a true red from madder. I think actually it's harder than you think. But I love all the pinks and the corals, and they just all kind of, you can get so many. I've actually got a bundle here. I mean, this is just a fraction of the colours that you can get from madder, but these have been modified in various different ways. Mm-hmm. Nick, remind me of my assistant here.
So some of them are from a full first bath of madder, which is a slightly oranger colour. Then the second bath goes a bit pinker. Then if you modify it, the one at the front there, so the one that's leaning towards purple, that's darkened a little bit. And I think we tried white vinegar on some of them, which kind of brightens it a little bit, although we didn't see too much effect there. And then the one at the back, Kerry, the very pale one.
That one.
Those are just with an exhaust bath, so they're after about 3 dips, you still got some oomph left in the roots after a while. So
yeah, it's a dye that just kind of keeps on giving, so you can keep re-simmering the roots, and you get so much colour out of it. And yeah, you can just keep using that dye pot and modify with. Yeah, I tend to use I sort of use iron occasionally, a bit of vinegar. But generally, and also over dyeing on various shades of yarn as well. So John Arbon have a lovely range of greys, ranging from a lovely light grey to a dark grey, and that will change your palette too. So you'll get all sorts of different colours. So that's what I like to do, really, try and experiment that way rather than constantly modifying with chemicals. And I just kind of get confused as well. So I kind of like to keep it simple and what I like, and yeah, try to do it that way. So talking about the history of madder, actual fibre dyed with madder was, I would say allegedly, because you can't trust all information, but found in Tutankhamun's tomb. But Egyptians did dye with these dyes, so I wouldn't be surprised. But I just find that astonishing that these ancient people were dyeing with plants and knew how to do it, and it's just a knowledge that we have lost, basically. And plastics and synthetics coming along, and synthetic colour has changed all that, and we've lost our way a little bit. And I appreciate that we'll never go back to plant dyeing on a big scale. That won't happen because we just can't possibly grow enough plants to do that, and it's time consuming, and it's a long arduous process really on a big scale, but it's really nice to keep it alive, I think. Woad is, where I live in Frome in Somerset, is famous for woad. We grew a lot of woad back in the day. Certainly during medieval times it was a really popular dye, along with the madder and the weld as well. During Napoleonic times, Frome was famous for the blue cloth of the army uniforms, which I think is an amazing fact. But with woad and indigo, I don't know if you all know, but you have to make a vat. You can't just dye with the plant. It has to be extracted from the plant through various different techniques. So that you can use a fructose vat, a urine vat if you're feeling adventurous. That's what they would have done in the medieval times. And you can just imagine how bad the medieval times smelt. Pretty pongy. But apparently it works very well. And also a chemical vat. So that will involve chemicals that are not ideal. But I think sometimes you've got to try all these methods to see what works for you. But I've heard the fructose vat works very well as well. I have a love-hate relationship with indigo and woad. I get quite frustrated with it. It's a process. This summer, I will be doing my very best to have the patience to learn indigo dyeing. I share a studio in Frome with a friend who dyes fabric, and she's an indigo whiz. And she keeps telling me, like, we'll sit down, we'll spend a day doing it together, it'll be okay. She's going to just talk me through it and keep me grounded and calm. I love the colours from indigo, but I've had a vat work, and I've had a vat be an absolute devastating disaster. So I think I like it. I like knowing that it's going to work. But it is brilliant. I mean, it's a brilliant colour. It's amazing. Another great way of experimenting with woad is if you don't want to go full hog and do the vat, you can extract with salt. It's really good fun. So you take plenty of salt, I'd say maybe a handful of leaves if you've grown them in your garden, scrunch it all up, and it will start to kind of froth up and go green. And after maybe about 5 or 10 minutes, you've got to give it some welly. And then you can scrunch it in your hair. You can do wool, fabric, anything you want to dye, and you'll pull it out, and it will just go blue in front of your very eyes, and it's brilliant. I've seen lots of people do the tips of their hair with it, and it'll last a good while before it washes out. But it's not. I mean, if you were going to do it and you wanted it to last, then you would probably mordant the yarn or the fabric for that method, I think. But generally, for indigo dyeing, you don't need to mordant. But yeah, definitely, if you fancy growing woad, then the salt method is really good fun. I recommend it. It's alchemy. It's like magic. So Weld, the elusive Weld. I can't blimmin' find it in the wild. I found a few patches where I found it. I think originally it's a Mediterranean plant. Yeah, so it came over here. It's just really picky where it wants to grow. It's just so random. It doesn't like competing with other plants. It tends to like sandy, chalky ground. It doesn't like nutrients. It's just the most unpredictable plant, I find. So Nick always finds it and sends me pictures smugly. And I'll just, where's that? And, it'll just be some random spot. Anyway, if you get hold of some, it is amazing. It produces the most vibrant yellow dye. It is beautiful, and it's one of my favourites. And I like to dye over dye grey with that. So I have this one here. So that is, it's on quite a pale grey base actually, but you get this amazing, almost neon green. And that is light fast, wash fast. That is, yeah, it is my favourite colourway, and very popular as well. But that is basically undyed, dyed on a white base, which I don't have an example of, but it is bright yellow. I mean, it is acid yellow. But yeah, finding it in the wild. So I have harvested some, and I tend to dry all my plants. If I go foraging and I find stuff, I will dry it, put it away, label it up. But I do have to occasionally buy from suppliers. But I will always try and purchase from suppliers that I know are fair trade, that look after their farmers. So I couldn't possibly grow enough to dye the wool that I sell. So that happens sometimes, and most dyers will have to eventually purchase. But dye plants are very expensive to buy, so it's always good to be able to go out and forage without taking everything. Don't ever take too much. Leave some behind. Don't go in like a combine harvester and just take everything. Also, to get green hundreds of years ago, and allegedly to dye Robin Hood, the legendary Robin Hood's robes, was a dye called Lincoln Green, and that was Woad combined with Weld to make the green robes, which is also an amazing fact, possible fact. The legendary Robin Hood. Goldenrod. Does anybody have this growing in their garden? Yeah? Brilliant dye plant. Similar to Weld, just as vibrant, slightly warmer yellow. But I dye when the flowers come out like this. So this is harvested from my garden. Similar to Weld. I'll probably talk right now actually about how I process the plants. So generally, with the kind of leafier plants like this, I will weigh out maybe equal weight to fibre. All goes in a pot with water, and it will simmer. Shake out all the bugs. Please don't cook the bugs. Let them scurry out. Give them a good shake. Give them a chance to crawl out. I have had things floating to the top and had to kind of rescue them. It's just horrible. I'm not a vegan, but I just can't bear the thought of kind of bugs. That's why I don't dye with cochineal, because I just can't stand the idea of dyeing with bugs. Anyway, but I'm not vegan because obviously I dye wool. So. Yeah, so that all goes in the pot, and you'll simmer it. Don't boil it because you ruin the colour, but simmer for about maybe 45 minutes to an hour, and you'll have your dye pot ready at that. Let it cool down. I tend to let it sit overnight actually, so it extracts more colour. So by the morning it'll cool down and you'll have a really rich pot of colour. Strain that out. You don't have to, but it's easier to get all the bits out of the wool. Sometimes I dye in the same pot as the plant, but then you end up picking bits out of the wool for hours on end. Yeah, so you've already mordanted the wool, remember, so that's the first stage, and that's a similar process as well. So you add your alum in the pot, your cream of tartar in the pot, mix it up, the clean wool, damp, goes into the pot, and that simmers for about an hour. Then I tend to leave that overnight to cool down. So it's a good few days of dyeing the whole process. Your mordanted yarn then goes in the dye pot, simmer for 45 minutes to an hour, and then let that sit overnight, and then you pull out your lovely dyed yarn, give it a rinse, hang it out, and you've got your, yeah, it's quite a straightforward process. It's not an exact science. The colours are very changeable, and depending on various different plants and what time of the year you've harvested them and where they've grown, you will get different colours as well. So when people try and say, when people ask me, can you match this colour to the last one I bought, or can you? No. Sometimes I can, like if I'm lucky, but generally if someone wants to knit a jumper or something, they have to kind of buy that quantity from me, and I will tend to dye to order, and it's small batch stuff. So tends to be how plant dyers work. I can't work on a big scale. I used to work out of my kitchen on my hob, and now I've got a little studio in Frome, which is much easier. But yeah, it's still very small batch because it's just me, and there's lots of lifting pots. It's not very glamorous. There's lots and lots of backache and heavy pots, but I love it. I absolutely love it. I wouldn't want to do anything else. Walnuts. Anybody got a walnut tree near them or in their garden? Collect the walnuts. They make an absolutely beautiful brown dye. They're full of tannin, and you don't need to mordant. So the tannin will do all that for you. You can also modify with iron, which is what the Romans used to do to get black fabric and black yarn. Well, they would have had probably fabric, not yarn. But that's how you get black, basically, with a tannin-rich plant and iron. One thing about using iron with wool is that it can make it quite harsh. So a quick dip is as much as I will do with iron, because it damages the structure of the wool and makes it rough. It's great on fabric and cotton and silk, but wool, you have to be very careful with iron. You don't leave it in too long. Dipping is quite nice. You can do lots of special colour changing effects with iron by dipping, and you can do kind of semi-solids and fun things with iron. But yeah, just be really careful with it. Use only a little bit if you ever try iron as a modifier. And you can use the leaves, the actual husk of the walnut, and the bark as well. So the whole tree is rich in tannin and smells lovely when it's simmering as well. It's really, really beautiful smell. So these are the walnuts, and the dye is actually you can see it's starting to go black here. Mm-hmm. That's where it's not the actual nut, it's the actual husk, the green bit. So you'll simmer those up, and you'll just see this. It's just such a rich dye, and you can let that sit for a few days if you like, and just extract all that colour out. And that's the same for alder cones as well. They're brilliant to collect as well. Just put them in a big bucket, cover them with water, and just let them sit for weeks. And that will just extract the dye. And you can just keep re-dyeing with those as well. They will just keep giving. And they're free. You can just go and pick. They're everywhere. Alder cones you can pick off the ground. They tend to grow along rivers. I haven't got my little example of my alder cone. No, I didn't bring it. Do you all know what alder cones look like? Little tiny cones. I did have a little example, but I haven't. Goodness knows where that is. Anyway, but yeah, collect those, put them in a bucket, cover them with water, and just forget about them, and just let that dye kind of come out. Same with the walnuts. Simmer those. And with the walnuts, you kind of get a. So that's an example there. So that brown in there is walnut. And with alder cones, you kind of get slightly orangey, warmer brown, and that's beautiful as well. But yeah, you don't need a mordant, so you can do that in your kitchen, easy. Dye fabric, dye wool, just give it a go, because they're just gorgeous, rich colours. Nettles, everywhere, and they give a fantastic colour. During the First World War, the Germans were short on cotton, so they used nettles as a fibre and a dye. In the Second World War, we dyed the uniforms with nettle as well, because it is a military green. When you see it dyed on fibre, I've got to get this right. That one. Yay! It's that one. There. So you can see why that would have worked for uniforms. But it's brilliant. I mean, the nettle is like a super plant. Has it got a bad reputation? Obviously. It's not the most attractive plant. Great for bugs and insects. It's just really stingy and uncomfortable and everywhere. But just chop them down and chuck them in a pot. You do need to mordant for nettles, by the way. It's a beautiful colour. But I just love the fact that it's actually, you can make fibre with it. You can make fabric with it. It's amazing. So I love that one. And dock leaf, which is also in this bundle. This is my wild bundle, by the way. So this is a little mini bundle set that is made up of all the colours that you can forage out on a walk, basically. Okay, that is Weld. I did talk about Weld being elusive, but you never know. You might find you might find it out on a walk, even if I don't. So the dock leaf. Oh my goodness, this is under pressure. That one. That is the dock leaf. That's dyed on a slightly darker base, so it is a bit richer. But again, I think some people don't know that you can dye with dock leaf. You can also dye with the roots, which I haven't done yet. But there are all sorts of different varieties of dock, which you can all dye with. But that gives a beautiful colour. They're all very yellow-based dyes, and it's only because I've dyed on a grey base that I get the green. So if you were to dye on a white base with Nettles dock, you'd kind of get slightly yellowier, greener tones, I think. But I like dyeing on the grey to get these kind of greener tones. Yeah, it's everywhere, so you can pick lots of it. It is. This year I've never seen so much dock everywhere. So yeah, pick it, shake it out again. The bugs love it. And yeah, dock is good. Dock is a good one to try. Again, you need to Mordant dock as well. Coreopsis flowers. Has anybody dyed with flowers or marigolds or anything like that? The Coreopsis gives, I mean, that's quite a pale colour, but you can get really strong orange from Coreopsis. And also similar, Cosmos and Dahlia are closely related to Coreopsis, so you also kind of get orangey tones as well from those flowers. But it's lovely because you can grow those easily in your garden. They will keep going. I mean, they keep growing well into autumn. As long as you keep deadheading them, cut them down to the first flowers, they just keep coming. And then you can collect those, dry them and put them away, and then you've got a stock over winter to play with. But just keep picking them and they'll keep coming, as long as you've planted enough. But yeah, and they're really pretty and the bugs love them. And they're just such a pretty flower. They're also known as tick seed. I don't know the history behind that. I don't remember. I think it's something to do with the seeds looking like little insects. But there's all these little facts about flowers and plants that I kind of need to learn more about, all those funny little names for things. And so I've talked about the Dahlia and the Cosmos. I might pass this around so you can all just have a look at the colour. I'll pass these round as well, actually. Shall I just pass that round and I'll pass that round that way and you can just have a little feel. And
that's how much grey and white?
That's on the Coreopsis is on the Exmoor sock, so quite a pale grey. So I'm going to finish by reading my little statement, which is dyeing with plants is labour-intensive, unpredictable, and you're at the mercy of the land, the seasons and climate. But working with nature is so rewarding and totally worth the effort. So yeah, so has anybody got any questions about what I've said or anything that you think I've missed or anything that you'd like to add? Yes?
I just wanted to, it's just a practical question, just when you dye the wool yarn, do you loosely tie it up? I can just imagine it getting into such a tangle.
Yeah, so what I do, I make sure it's tied loosely in a figure of 8 through the skein at one end, or somewhere in two places basically. And then I have a stash of reusable Ziploc ties. Not the ones that you have to throw away and cut, but you can undo them, you can keep using them. And I put one of those through, so you've got something to hold on to when you put it in the pot. And yes, it does tangle up, because it's a big old skein of yarn. Sometimes you have to kind of reskein it, but generally that will work and keep it in one piece. And yeah, I mean, I put so many in, sometimes they do pull it out and everything's just completely, which is a mess. But yeah, the Ziploc ties are really good. I know they're plastic, but you can keep reusing them and they last forever, so, because they're plastic. Anybody else? Yes?
I'm guessing that doing dyeing with petals, for instance, Coreopsis I've got, when simmering it, so I'm guessing you wouldn't do it as long to extract, you do longer.
Yeah, I mean, you can, it's the same, no, you can go for it with you can keep simmering it. You can keep simmering it until you've got the colour that you want.
If you kind of not boil it, but simmer it for like too long, does that kind of like dilute?
No, I don't think so. It will just be a more intense colour. Right. If you don't want it to be as intense, then yeah, you don't need to simmer it as long. And you can put the flowers in with the yarn as well and kind of pull it out every now and then and go, ooh, is that good? Put it back in and simmer it. So sometimes you can put, if that's what you want to do, that will work as well, as long as it's not all, there are some dyes you don't want to put in with yarn, so the kind of stalky things, and that gets all kind of stuck in the yarn. But things like flowers you can put in. And sometimes actually when you dye with flowers, you sometimes get quite nice effect if you just leave it in the pot and you get like little concentrated bits of colour where a flower has sat next to the yarn. So you can sometimes, so I've got like, what's it called?
Fish kettle.
A fish kettle. So sometimes I'll sit that on top of my hob, lay a skein in that, and then I'll just not touch it, and I'll just drop flowers all over it and just let that colour bleed out where it's sitting next to the yarn, and that gives nice effects as well. And also I do something called bundle dyeing. So I will mordant a skein. So with flowers you do need to mordant as well. But I'll lay out a wet skein, not soaking, but wet, and I will sprinkle dried flowers all over it, then bundle it up, tie it with string, and then put it in a steamer. You can put it over the hob over a colander, or you can put it in a steamer, 45 minutes or so steaming, and then you pull it out, and then you've got like a speckly effect yarn. And you can play with that as well. You can just do concentrated areas on the skein, and you can kind of get that speckly effect that other dyers, the acid dyers can do more easily than the plant dyers, but you can do it with plants as well. That's a really fun thing to do as well, and that's a nice reason to have the flowers in your garden. What else can you do with flowers? Yeah, the bundle dyeing is great. It's good fun. It's really fun to do with kiddos as well. Yeah.
I've seen some of your yarn was dyed that way.
Yeah, actually I've got
for a feature.
Let's
And
go
that's
back
absolutely
here.
gorgeous.
That one.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
So you get, and that's marigolds actually. I think that might be marigold and Coreopsis. I can't quite remember.
Yeah.
I think that's marigold flowers there. But yeah, you can just, and everything you do is unique as well. It's not manufactured. It's unique to you. It's what you've created with plants that you've grown. So I think that's something really special. And then when it's turned into a garment or a jumper or hat or mittens, and something that you know that you're going to have for a really long time, and it's been dyed with plants that have been grown for that purpose, I think is a really lovely thing. Special to me. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Question about avocado skins, because I've not ever dyed it.
I didn't go much into that, did I? Actually, yeah.
Really lovely, gentle pink, but you have to mordant.
Yes, you do. So as I mentioned, avocados are fugitive, so it will fade. Certainly, if you leave it in any sunny window or out in the sun. That's the thing about plant dyes. Like anything, and the synthetic dyes as well, you don't want to leave them out in a sunny place, like in a sunny porch, or because that will damage them and it will damage the colour. So protecting them as much as you can and being gentle with them and washing them gently. But avocados, yes. So you do need to mordant. What was your question again? Sorry, I went off on one there. Did I answer it? Yeah.
Avocados,
Yes.
I did avocados. And the smell was awful.
I thought you were going to say it was wonderful.
No, it's
I don't remember them. I don't remember the smell being bad.
Quite pervasive. I couldn't believe there were any other dyes which were really nice to have and left your hands smelling lovely, or any others which were...
Most of them smell pretty pongy, it has to be said. As I said, walnuts smell quite pleasant when they're simmering.
Okay.
But then it's personal. So one smell might be really offensive, and then Woad is horrendous. Woad is stinky. Ugh. Sorry, I shouldn't have done that, but it is a horrible smell, and I really struggle with that. So that's good that you can do a lot of that outside, like indigo dyeing and woad dyeing, because you don't want to splash it everywhere as well, because you're doing lots of pouring. Next time you come to my talk, I'll be an indigo expert. If there's a next time. But yeah, it's they are smelly. Things like if you're simmering dock leaves or nettles, you're going to get a bit of a grassy pong from them. But I've just got used to it now, so I just open a window or something, and I'm like nose blind. Yes.
Hey, do you ever use fungi?
I have never used it. No.
Husband is a forager.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm quite keen to use fungi, but again, I don't think it's particularly colour fast. What I've read, and extracting can be a little bit tricky. And I've got a feeling that the ones in this country are ones that are harder to find than the chicken of the woods we were foraging yesterday.
Yeah.
So have you ever got any experience on that?
Well, I have a lot of experience with fungi, not dyeing at all.
Okay.
But I've only read a little bit, and I think you're right. The few varieties that are mentioned tend not to grow in this country.
Yes. I think there's one that you can get purple from, and I think it might be further up north.
Cortinarias.
Is that what it is?
I think cortinarias you can dye with, but
Okay.
I don't really want to pick everything, though. I have an issue with picking things that I like lichens. I think there's an issue with it's a bit of a no-no now, and I don't think we need to kind of go around picking everything under the sun.
Take
Yeah.
decades to grow, and then it feels a bit mean if you.
And then I come along and pick it all just to get the colour I want, and no, I don't need to do that. Yes.
If you find a branch that's blown off a tree in a storm, I think it's all right.
Yeah, if it's already fallen off, then fine.
I guess
but
it depends on quantities, how many you can find in a friendly way.
I don't approve of picking anything off a living plant a tree. I'm not going to go start taking walnut leaves off a tree. If they've fallen down on the ground, fine. But I'm not climbing up trees to, that's not. It's not what I want to do.
But if we see Weld, we'll hack it to bits.
If I see Weld, I will rip it out at the roots. No mercy. You're coming with me. Yeah, that's the truth.
For the rest of the world.
Anybody else? Yes.
You used a term in your slideshow that I think it was about dyeing on a grey base was to sadden.
Yes.
And is that as it sounds?
So saddening is what you do with iron. So if you add iron, it will sadden the colour. So various modifiers will do various things to the colours. So if you want to brighten, I don't modify lots. I dye. I'm very lucky. The colours I dye just work for me. I don't want purple or a certain kind of red, or this is nature. So I extract the dye. I dye what comes from that plant. I don't want to change it. And so I don't do a lot of that. I do quite like iron. I do quite like what it does, but I don't like what it does to the wool. So why would I damage the wool just for the sake of saddening the colour?
Does that make it more grey then?
Yeah, it kind of makes it's like an earthy, moody kind of colour, but I don't need to do that. Because actually, if I want to modify colour, I will just dye on a different base colour. So I will just dye on a darker grey, or I'll dye on a lighter grey. I don't need to use modifiers. I don't really want to add vinegar to my dye pot. And
you've got the madder there that's on a grey.
Yeah, but this was
Or compare it to the one on the grey, which is effectively saddened.
So that's madder. So that's saddened purely by dyeing on a darker base. And these are the colours that I love. They're kind of earthy, they're nature, I don't need to do anything. Nature's done it, and the sheep has done it. And I've just put those two things together, and I, get these amazing colours. It's like, I can take a bit of credit, but the plant's done the work, and the wool has done the work, and yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, that's all madder. All those colours are madder. And it's like all these colours here. So we've got madder, weld. I'll hand these round in a minute, or you can come up and have a look. There's the undyed grey as a contrast there, walnut, and various different colours of madder. And the same here, that bright colour is the weld. And you've got the madder pink there and the undyed grey. And then this one here is Harvest Hues dyed with Weld. So I don't need to combine Woad or indigo with Weld when I can dye on these gorgeous grey bases. So that's become my style really, is that I love grey. I love the soft pinks on the white base. That's really pretty. But I prefer the earthier colours, the more nature colours. Anybody else? Anything you think I might have missed, or a technical thing that I won't be able to answer? All good? Yeah?
Well, thank you so much, Kerry. It was really insightful.
No, thank you. Thank you for all listening to me. Gibber on. Do come up and have a look. Well, thank you. I'll curtsy. Thank you. Thank you.